Hi, welcome to Coming Out Stories and Beyond. My name is Anne-Marie Zanzel. I am a lesbian, an ordained minister, and partnered with a lovely woman. I am here to share the stories of the coming out journey and other things that happen when you come out later in life. Today, joining me, I have Samantha Fox. Samantha Fox is a late bloomer, a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in New York City, and a guide and coach for women coming out later in life in her newly launched program, Curious, Questioning, and Coming Out. She's the mother of 3 humans and 2 fur babies. Samantha came out after marriage with 3 kids under 5 years of age, almost 20 years ago in 2002, when there was little support for women going through this awakening. Samantha, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I can't wait to hear your story. So, Samantha, tell me your story.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh boy, where do I start? Okay, so well, I had no awareness, no conscious awareness of being attracted to girls or women growing up. I always dated guys. I was a serial monogamist. I always had a serious relationship. I was very relationship oriented. And I really didn't have any awareness. And at about 25, I met my future husband and got married at 27. He was my boss at the time. He had hired me when I was 25, and he was 16 years older than me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it was exciting in a lot of ways. He owned the company that I worked for. There was a lot of travel involved. And it was just sort of like a whole new life that I never imagined having. And so I kind of just went with it, and we ended up getting engaged and getting married. Um, right before I, let's see, while I was engaged, I would say, yeah, it was while I was engaged. One of my very closest friends wanted to kind of like fool around.
Mm-hmm.
One of my closest girlfriends, and she asked me, before you get married, what do you think? Do you want to? And I was like, no, I'm really not interested in doing that. That's not my thing. I'm not interested. And she ended up getting together with another girlfriend of mine. And the
Mm-hmm.
two of them ended up having a little bit of an affair while I was on one of my business trips. And when I came back, they told me about it. And I remember feeling really jealous and upset that this had happened, and that, I don't know, something just that I wasn't a part of it, even though she had already asked me if I wanted to, and I said no, but there was something, it left me with something.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just sort of like, okay, well, I guess I'm never going to have this experience, and I'm going to get married, and that's just what it's going to be. And so I got married, and very soon after getting married, I got pregnant with twins. And I left working with my husband at the time. I stopped working with him, and I started graduate school to
Mm-hmm.
become a therapist. And I was in one of the classes, which was human development. And I was pregnant at the time. I was about 5 months pregnant. And they brought in a young woman who was maybe 20. I was 27 at the time, and she told us her coming out story.
Hmm.
So I'm sitting in human development, 5 months pregnant with twins, and this woman starts to tell her coming out story, and out of nowhere my insides start doing gymnastics. Like,
Mm.
all kinds of crazy feelings happening inside of me
Right.
that totally shocked me. I had no idea that was going to happen. And it was very unsettling, to say the least, as
Mhm.
I'm sitting there pregnant with
With
twins,
friends.
and I just had to shut it down. I just had to completely shut it down, and I did. Um, and just sort of squashed it and kept going and ended up, starting a family. I was a stay-at-home mom. I stopped school at the time, to be home with the kids. Ended up getting pregnant with another. And it was only when my daughter was about, so it was September 11th. So it was 2001. Um, Something about September 11th just completely, I mean, I live in New York City.
Mhm.
So, just this being so close to so much devastation and so much life ending, and feeling like in the marriage there was so much that had been missing. We had been in couples therapy from before we were married, throughout the entire marriage. It wasn't a terrible marriage at all. We were great business partners,
Yeah.
and we were great coworkers, and so we did a really good job, like in that way. But in terms of intimacy, it was just really lacking. And so something about September 11th just made me feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? My life could end any second, you
Mhm.
know, and I'm very lonely. I'm very unhappy. I love being a mom. I
Mhm.
love I love my life. I had a very lovely life.
Mhm.
No complaints. We didn't fight, but the intimacy was really, really missing.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I just suddenly decided, I somewhere inside of me just decided that I was going to start looking. I was going to keep my eyes open. It's sort of like this thing I said to myself. I'm going to keep my eyes open and start to just look around for a woman. Like, I don't even know. I didn't have a plan or anything. I didn't even know exactly what to look for. But I just knew, I felt, I had been having feelings throughout the marriage of being more attracted to women. He traveled a lot. Every time he traveled, I was watching lesbian movies. I'd go to the video store and bring home the movies. And I had the books, and they'd come out when he wasn't there, and I'd read the lesbian books and love stories and whatnot. And then when he'd come back, all that would go away. And,
So,
so
a bit of a double life there for a while.
yes, like very in the closet in so many ways. I also always loved to journal. I had tons and tons of journals, but literally my journals were closed and in the closet. And
Mhm.
I
No
was
pun
locked
intended.
away. Yeah. So I was in the closet in a lot of ways. And it was so September 11th, 2001. It was that next summer when I met somebody and didn't even realize what was happening when it was happening. And felt like very infatuated with this person, and even went so far as to tell him that I was very infatuated with this person, because I really didn't have a sense of that it wasn't like a sexual attraction. It really felt like an infatuation.
Right.
And that ended up developing into more than an infatuation. Like, the infatuation grew into, something more sexual and intimate. And I very quickly realized that I couldn't stay in my marriage. So it was like a very quick thing.
So, I'm curious, you said though, like the year before, you had said you're just gonna keep your eyes open for a woman, and then when the woman shows up, you don't even know, like, what's going on. So what do you think, like, where was the disconnect?
Probably like, um, I think with men, for me, it had always been very clear. The attraction was, I don't know, there was something about the attraction that felt very different than it ever has for me with a woman.
Mhm.
But there was almost like a kind of like a seduce and conquer kind of thing with men
For you.
for me. And there was nothing like that happening here.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that again, actually.
Mhm.
So I think I was confused because there was none of that. And I had no idea what kind of woman I would even be attracted to.
Mhm.
And, um, it wasn't as if I looked at this woman and I thought, oh my
Mhm.
God, she's so beautiful, or she's so hot, or I want to kiss her, or any of these things. I didn't think any of that.
Mhm.
I just felt like I want to be around her.
Mhm.
I want to know her more. And and I mean, full disclosure. So she was a yoga teacher,
Of course.
right? Of course. And I had
A
just
lot of hot
started.
yoga
Yeah,
teachers out there.
so cliche. I mean, so cliche, right? She uh she also had never been with a woman.
Wow.
Yeah. So for both, and she was about 5 years younger than me, or 6 years younger than me. So but you know, she was more obviously gay than I was.
Mhm.
And so yeah, so she was my yoga teacher, and I was so infatuated that the first month after I met her and took her class, I found every studio that she worked at and I followed her, and I'd show up in different towns. We had a summer home in the Hamptons. And so I lived there for the summertime, and I just started following her to every town, every place for her class.
Did you think you were a stalker?
I was a stalker. I fully stalked her. I would be really slow rolling up my mat at the end. And, she thought I just needed somebody to talk to. Like, she thought, oh, something must be going on for this woman. She needs somebody to talk to. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, but it was very evident very quickly that it was more than that. And
Can I just ask you a quick
yeah,
question? Here you are stalking the cute little yoga teacher.
yeah.
Did it dawn on you that at that point, did you realize, "Oh, this is something more than me wanting to go to a yoga class?" Did it like at that point, did it dawn on you like, "Oh gosh, I'm attracted to this woman?"
No, it still
Wow.
wasn't. Yeah, it still didn't break through um that I'm attracted to her. It was more, I'm so I can't I'm so obsessed with her. I'm so infatuated with her.
Mhm.
Um there's something about her. I don't know what it is. It was that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it took a little while. We went to dinner together. We went and had a coffee, and we ended up making a plan to go out for dinner together. And this was sort of a turning point. So this all happened within, like, I met her in July, and it was like 6 weeks, or five or 6 weeks until, the first kiss, and then another maybe 2 or 3 weeks until I told my husband.
Mhm.
But he knew something was happening. I mean, I was not myself at all.
Mhm.
And but we went out to dinner, and it was one of those typical lesbian dinners where, 6 hours later you're still sitting at the table.
Talking. Yeah.
Which,
Mhm.
right, which with my husband, it was like the minute he was done, we were out of the restaurant. So
Mhm.
he knew I was out to dinner with her. He was not in the Hamptons at that time. He was back in the city, but he was trying to call me, and we had three really young kids.
Mhm.
I didn't answer my cell phone,
Mhm.
which was not like me.
Mhm.
And so he kept calling and calling and calling. And by the time I got to my phone, he had called like 26 times.
Wow.
And I knew then, that's when it hit me.
That it's not just there's something about her, like you were falling in love.
Yeah, I was something that I didn't know what was happening, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
something
Or
more.
infatuation, I'm sure you
Infatuation.
can look at it with a different eye now. But
Yeah.
you didn't like most of us, we don't know when we're falling in love or infatuation, and then it's only with hindsight that we can say, "Oh, wait a minute, it was actually something different," you know?
Yeah.
So, you're extraordinarily infatuated with this woman. Your husband's called you 26 times, and if he had called you 3 before when you were with somebody, you would have answered it like boom, like that.
Yeah, I was
But
always on
you're
my phone. Three
yeah.
little kids were at home,
Mhm.
with caretaker. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also 10 o'clock was my cutoff time for
Mm-hmm.
everything. After 10, don't try to touch me, don't try to do anything with me. I'm sleeping with him. And it was 11 and I was still out and I hadn't answered my phone. So this was way out of character. So he
Mm-hmm.
got very alerted and very activated and canceled all his meetings for the next day and drove back to the Hamptons and, was there first thing in the morning.
Was he worried like something had happened to you? No.
No, he came right first thing in the morning and said, "Are you a lesbian?"
Wow.
Yeah.
And you didn't really know yourself yet.
Right. So I said, "I don't think so."
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, he must have seen something. I'm sure you guys have talked about it since then, and he's probably seen something about you that you didn't even see about yourself.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, I think it was very obvious that I was
That
going
you were in
through
love with, you were
I
infatuated.
yeah, and there was like a transformation happening. I just wasn't myself.
Mm.
And he knew me well,
Mhm.
so that
So
was
what
sort of the
happened?
beginning. Yeah.
So he said, "Are you a lesbian?" You
Yeah.
said, "I don't think so."
I don't think so. And then he said, "Well, then how do you explain, last night?" Um, and I didn't really have a good explanation. I just said we were deep in conversation. I didn't notice the time. Um, what about the kids? How could you not, I said my phone was in my bag under my chair. I was deep in conversation. I mean, all of that was true.
Mhm.
And there was nothing physical happening, and we weren't talking about us being in a relationship. I mean, there was nothing happening other than actually having deep conversation.
Right.
But inside, there were things happening for me, that I didn't understand, still didn't understand at that time. So
Mhm.
um from then it got pretty intense. So it was that was the middle of August. And by Labor Day, so I always remember
Jubilee.
Labor Day of 2002. No, yes, it was 2002 Labor Day. That's the last time I was ever intimate with a man.
Mhm.
And so I always count that each Labor Day. I'm like, it's this many years, it's that many years. And yeah, it developed, and I ended up telling him that I was in love, and it was very quickly. It was like 6 weeks after I had met her, so it was a little bit ridiculous in a lot of ways. He tried to. I told him I didn't want to be with him.
Mhm.
I didn't want to stay in the marriage, which was really crazy. I mean, we had built up a lot together and had a young
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
And he said, "What if we get you an apartment and you can just check this out? You can test this out. You can see how it feels. You can do this on the side. I'm fine with that."
Mm.
And
I always liked, sort of, uh, roll my eyes, I guess, a little bit at the misogyny in that statement,
yeah,
because my ex-husband did that to me as well. He was like, "Well, if you wanted to be with a man, I wouldn't care, but because it's a woman, I don't care so much." And
right,
so it's like, if you wanted to have an affair with a man, he wouldn't be offering to get you an apartment in the city, or
right,
if you wanted to be in a relationship with a man, that would not have happened.
right,
Because
right,
I feel like that sometimes men think that it's less than, unless you're a lesbian. Don't ever out for your wife an apartment in the city if she's
right,
gay. Because she'll be out of there.
right.
So,
Yeah.
did you guys do that?
No, I said that I wasn't interested in that, and
Good
that
for you.
I really thought that we needed to separate.
Well, good for you. That's very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, I just knew, it wasn't, because it wasn't about going somewhere to have sex.
No.
No, it just wasn't about that.
Well,
So,
don't you find, now that you work with women coming out of later in life, that sometimes women try to maintain all of that?
oh yeah.
Their marriage,
Yep.
their relationship. I mean, they just try to keep it all going.
Yep.
And what what do you think for you was different? Like what, like I went, that was the same thing with me. Like this was all like negotiations. And he was like, we talked about threesomes, we talked about polyamory, and I'm like, no, no, no.
Mhm,
And I said, Jim, if I sleep with a woman, you're not going to be there. you know
mhm,
and so I was very sure once that I went down, like I left, I didn't meet somebody beforehand, but once I started coming out, I just knew that I couldn't stay married anymore. So that
mhm.
I never had to deal with any of those things, and those are so hard to deal with. What was it for you? Like why did you say no, I don't want to do that? Because a lot of women would have taken that opportunity, would have taken that road.
Yeah. Um, I felt after I met her like I connected to myself in a way that I hadn't, certainly hadn't since I met him. So
Mhm.
it was almost as if when I got into this relationship with him, and remember, we have 16 years apart. So we were at very different life stages when we came together. And there was something about being in the relationship with him that felt like part of me died
Mhm.
or was asleep
Mhm.
in like a deep slumber.
Mhm.
And it was like I was so alive and so embodied and awake that I just wanted that. I
Mhm.
just wanted to feel like that. I didn't want, anything more that had to do with the life I was living, which, along the course of the marriage, which was 7 years, progressively as time went on, I was just feeling like, how did I get here?
Mhm.
Like, whose life? How did I get into this life? Is this my life?
Mhm.
Not because of my kids. I loved my kids, but buying properties, fixing them up, selling them, like project after project, and just a little bit of like a more high-end lifestyle than I was really comfortable with, where I'd want to like go to a business dinner in like jeans and like whatever, but like he wanted me to dress a certain way, and just feeling out of place in so many ways. And with her, I just felt so myself. So it was really just about that.
Well, yeah, I often describe it to people that like it's so hard to capture the words, but it was like feeling like coming home. And
Yeah.
and like for me, I remember that it was like, how could this stranger feel like home? My kids are my home. I have 4 kids. I love them. My now ex-husband, he's part of that home. Like, how can this woman who's a virtually stranger to me feel like home? And it was really because I was coming home to myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this happened so quickly for you. You are like
Well,
on my record. This is like a record here.
the awareness piece was quick. The actual separation to divorce piece took 3 years.
hmm
We lived under the same roof for 3 years.
hmm
I slept in his office on a pull-out couch for 3 years,
hmm
and he made it very clear that he was going to make my life as miserable as he possibly could for as long as he possibly could.
I'm
And
sorry, Samantha.
and he did. And it was so it was like this amazing awakening that was also the worst 3 years of my life
Well,
so far.
he was gonna make you pay for it.
Yeah, and he did. I mean, for many years, even beyond that. So,
I always makes me so sad when I hear that.
thank you. Yeah, it's such a shame. And, and we did wonderfully with the kids and co-parenting. I mean, we're both at least adult enough to have managed that. But I mean, it was just the worst, really the worst.
Can I ask you now that you have perspective on all of this, what advice would you give to other women who are going through this and their husbands being a jerk?
I
How do you
mean,
what are strategies to navigate it?
yeah, I mean, I think trying to understand a little bit about what they're feeling,
Meaning
while
the women or
no, the
their
men, the
okay.
men. right? Because, I think part of me believed that it would be easier for him because it's a woman. It's not another man. If it were a man, then he'd have something to compare himself to, but this is not even comparable, right? Because it's a woman, and
Mhm.
that would be more understandable, and he would, not be as hurt somehow. Still hurt, but not as hurt. But I think instead it's like the opposite.
It
And
is. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so I think trying to understand just a little bit about what this does to a man in terms of their masculinity
Mhm.
and how they view themselves in the world, and you know finding some compassion inside of yourself to also just try to see it through his eyes a little bit,
Mhm.
might ease some of the difficulty.
Yeah. I find that our community bends over backwards to find compassion sometimes for what the spouse is going through.
Yeah,
I
and it's
find that
devastating.
yeah, it's
And
devastating because everything changes.
yeah, and currently I have a client who I've been working with for 2 years. She was married for 33 and a half years, family, and her husband just came out 2
Mhm.
years ago. And so I'm working with her and I've watched her go through this process with him, but I was him.
Ah. So
And
has it opened your eyes at all?
I mean, yes, and it's so I have so many feelings when I'm
Yeah.
working with her.
I bet it's hard.
It's hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
But I feel for her and I really feel for him. I don't know him, but I really feel for him and how hard this must have been after that many years of marriage. And she's so angry still. And I mean, yes, this is really impactful to the partners that get left. And it's like a really big injury. And my ex-husband is remarried. He's been remarried for 10 years or more now. And he's so happy. And his wife is so much better for him than I was. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, but I mean, really, they're great together. So
Mhm.
I'm happy for him, and
Mhm. That's
but yeah.
my ex-husband is partnered now, and she's so much
Yeah.
she has actually some of my qualities in the sense that she's very politically liberal, but she's also straight.
Right.
And she's good for him. The things
Yeah.
that like bothered me so much about our relationship, like the lack of emotional intimacy and the things that really bothered me don't seem to bother her. And she's very happy with him. And I've had Christmas celebrations with them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Same. I did
they're
holidays.
happy.
Yeah.
So,
Graduations and all kinds of, traveling to go to, the kids' graduations in different
mhm,
states and whatnot. I mean, there's been a lot of family time and a
yes.
lot of coming together, the three of us really, to work on things with the kids when stuff comes up. And
So,
so,
but I want to just take you back. So, because we started this conversation too about like what you said is that there were no resources for you. Like you sort of did this on your own.
yes.
And you're sleeping on the couch in your husband's office. He's shaming you as much as he possibly can.
Yes, also outed me too. I mean, it literally felt like he took a banner and wrote a big sign and hung it up in the center of Broadway in New York City that I'm a lesbian. And everybody knew. He outed me to everybody.
And so, because, he's a good guy and, it's not his fault that your divorce is happening.
Right.
Yeah, my ex-husband outed me too. We have very similar stories. So he outed me to the world. So how was that? What was the reaction? I mean, you're in a liberal New York City. Was it as liberal as you thought it was going to be? Or,
I mean, yes, I think that, there are certain things that just happen when people separate and get divorced.
yeah.
And I don't think it matters what the reasons are. I think just the same kind of things happen regardless. So, um, I didn't. I mean, it was uncomfortable for people to just know in that way where it was so loud. And also that that was the thing that he told people, that that was why we were getting separated. And understandable also how he got that idea. Though
Hmm.
he had said to me many times when we were married that if things didn't change in terms of our intimate sexual life, that he didn't want to stay married to me.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I had already lived through years of him saying that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, anyway, it all became about me being gay. To me, that's not what it was. It was
Yeah,
really,
I mean,
yeah,
often marriages have a lot of complicated issues, and sometimes being gay is the impetus that and starts the divorce because it just does. But oftentimes, a lot of my clients also have lot deeply troubled marriages that
yeah,
them being gay or coming out as gay is really sometimes a gift because
yes,
it makes them leave marriages they shouldn't be in.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah,
And what you said, I also realized that too, is that divorce is hard.
yeah,
And,
yep,
like, so things happen with divorces that, like, when people take sides, people, and sometimes that one spouse ends up with some friends, one ends up spouse with
correct.
another. What I have found that what came to sort of my rescue were some people in the queer community, but other women that had gone through divorce in my very white upper middle class town that I was from.
Yeah.
And
So,
that's the women who sort of embraced me and took me in. They were all straight, but they were really wonderful to me.
yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing for me that was so hard was that, at least in New York, I was pretty young in terms of having kids at the age I had my kids.
Yeah,
I was
like
one of the
early
youngest,
30s, that's young.
right? So I was like one of the youngest moms in the classes, that's in their classes at school. Everybody else was older. So I was pretty young and I didn't know anybody that had gone through divorce. So, I was a real trailblazer with that one too. Um, and so people had really strange responses. I'll never forget one of the responses. This friend of mine is a therapist. I'll never forget her response. And I ran into her a few years ago and she remembered what she said to me when I told her that we were going to separate and that I was coming out. She said, "What about your house in East Hampton? How can you how can you do that with your house in East Hampton?" I was like really shocked
What?
by that.
Yeah,
That was all she thought about was,
the stuff.
your life looks so perfect.
Mhm.
Everything is so perfect. How can you not, like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
And that was painful. Like, that really felt, I mean, and also just showed me, like, how shallow some people can be.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Well, Samantha, you had checked all the boxes. You got the rich husband, you got the beautiful life, you have 3 beautiful children. You're checking all the boxes. You've got a life people envy, and there was
absolutely.
something clearly
Right.
missing.
Right.
And how luckily you found it 7 years into the marriage and not 27 years into the marriage. Like a
Correct.
lot of the like I was married 26 years.
Right.
So, and I'm sure a lot of your clients have been married
Yes.
that long. So
Yes.
the blessing of this is you figured it out pretty darn young, which is good.
Which was good.
So
Yes.
tell me, what was it like going out into the lesbian world? Like here you are, 3 little kids.
I mean, it was a lot of fun.
I bet.
Yeah. So I ended up partnering with that person that I met for about 6 years.
Mhm.
We ended up moving in together. But because it was both of our first experiences, we did kind of, we went to the tea parties and we went to the lesbian bars and the lesbian clubs. And there was one bit of support that I had. It was in the year, I believe it was 2003. Do you know Joanne Fleischer that wrote Living Two Lives?
Dr. Joanne? Yeah.
Yeah. So she, at that time, was still, I mean, she was doing
Practicing.
her workshops
Yeah.
and I went to one.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah. And so this was 2003. I went for the weekend. It was in Amherst, Massachusetts. There were 20 women, from all over the country,
Mhm.
from all different situations. And I, in that group, I left the group with one friend that I have stayed so close to and have grown my later in life lesbian group to be really the community that I do all of my travels with. So all of my trips are around this group of women, and that's been amazing. So,
Mhm.
um,
We really have to thank Dr. Joanne. Like, so when I was coming out, she was still practicing. I think she sees, I know I've had a client of mine that saw her,
yeah,
and that was like 3 or 4 years ago. Is she still practicing? Do you
I
know?
think with the
Individually?
pandemic, I think with the pandemic, I don't think she's running her workshops anymore, but with the pandemic, she started to see people again because there was sort of like an explosion of women coming out later during
After
and
Glennon Doyle.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Untamed.
yeah, yeah. So you had fun. You found community.
Yeah. And and had three little people, and had to get through the divorce, and then had to get through moving out. I had to move out of the marital home, and so it was an interesting time because, as I said, divorce, it doesn't really matter the reasons, but a lot goes with it. And while it
Mhm,
was so exciting to have this awakening, and I felt more myself than ever, and totally identified as lesbian, and there was no question in my mind, I also had a lot of grief over the loss of a life that I had built and known, and my kids knew. And now my kids were going back and forth, and they were having a hard time. And there was some trauma involved for them around that. And so it was like my coming out story became like, for me during those years, became a lot about loss and grief. Like, I was
mhm,
really, really struggling with my kids and
mhm,
not having them all the time when I had been a stay-at-home mom. And he traveled, he was away about 3 or 4 months out of the year. And suddenly I had to split my time with them. And
mhm,
that was very difficult for me. And so the relationship, I think, was stressed by that because
mhm,
she was younger and she just wanted to have fun.
mhm.
And she saw it as like this beautiful new beginning. And I couldn't be in that with her because I was in an ending.
And a beginning. So you were holding the both in
I
juxtaposition,
was
which
holding
was
both.
I've done that. It's very, very, and most of our later in life community do that. There are some
So
people
hard.
that are later in life but are single and they don't have to do some of the
Yes.
other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So tough.
Yeah.
Right. So it took a toll
Yeah.
eventually, and we split up.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'm on my, so that was number one. I've had four. I'm on number four now. Long-term serial monogamist,
Mhm.
long-term relationships. I tried someone who had kids next for 3 years. Then I was with someone who didn't have kids for about 5 years. And now I just started dating at the week before the pandemic, the week before the lockdown, someone who is newly out and has kids and is not divorced. Um, but I don't think they're going to get divorced anytime soon. And they're very amicable, and they move in and out of the house, and the kids have the house, and it's a
Are
very
they
different,
nesting?
they're nesting.
Can you tell people what nesting is?
Yeah, nesting is when you maintain the family home for the
Mhm.
kids. So the home becomes the kids' home, and the parents are the ones that move in and out. And a lot of the times they share another space outside of the family home.
Mhm.
So my current partner has an apartment, and it's a two-bedroom apartment, and she and her husband move in and out of that apartment. One stays in the house 1 week, and they kind of do that.
Whew. How old are her kids?
She has twins also that are almost 13, and an 8-year-old.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
little.
Little. Yeah, yeah. Um, what kind of work now do you do? And I know you're a therapist and you're in New York and licensed as a therapist in New York. So tell me a little bit about the women you work with and the people you serve as a therapist now.
Yeah. So I'm in private practice. I work with really all kinds of people as a therapist, trauma informed.
Hmm.
But I do a lot of work with, I also see couples. I see a lot of couples. I work with,
You work with gay couples up? Yeah.
I have a lot of lesbian couples.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yep. And I do sex therapy, sexuality, um, and um, and work with women coming out later in life. So that was my niche from the very beginning when I started my private practice. I started advertising that, I can help you through this.
Hmm.
And so I've been doing that for quite some time. And just in the last couple months, um, during the pandemic, I came up with a group for women coming out later in life, which is
Hmm.
Curious Question Coming Out Group, which are 5-week coaching programs for
Hmm.
women. And I'm just starting and I'm going to add more to them, but if you just look up curiousquestioningcomingout.com, it's all there so you can see it. Um,
We'll have
and
all your information on the last slide in this video.
yeah,
So that's why we took all these. So if anybody wants to contact Samantha, you can do that, and all the information will be at the end of this video.
yeah. So, but therapy is, in my therapy practice, I see people going through all of the similar kinds of things that I went through. And, you know, um, there are a lot of stages to this. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of how can I how is it possible that I can be 38 and have been married for this long, but I didn't know this about myself? Like, how is this possible?
Or I
Right?
was 55 and I haven't didn't know this about myself and
All
stuff.
of it, all of it. And even younger people, even, 29. How can I be 29 and just be coming, and it's too late. I hear a lot of people say it's too late, it's too late.
Oh no.
Right. I know.
No.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've been doing this work for 3 years now with people coming out later in life. And I started from the grief perspective, which we were talking about before we started this chat. And it is that there are such like if you look up the like LGBTQIA identity, like identity development, it almost follows that to a T. And whether you're 15 following that identity or 75, it sort of goes in the same steps. And a lot of the women I work with often are pretty accomplished people, because they've been trying to figure out what's missing. So they go back to school and get a degree here and a degree here. So they're at typically accomplished women and also women who are used to seeking help. So they like if they can't figure it out, they find somebody that can help them. And I find that they want it to be linear. They're like, I want to start here and I want to be done here, and just gonna take like 3 or 4 weeks, right? And it's like, no, this is such like I was talking to an engineer yesterday and she said to me, she goes, thank God for you saying that because I just want it to be done. And I said, no, it's a back and forth process. So for example, the person I was talking to yesterday, 3 weeks ago, identified as lesbian and now she's bisexual. So it's a process,
Yeah, and also that can change. I mean, when I first came out, I thought I said, well, I must be bisexual because I've only been with men, but now I want to be with her, so that means I'm bisexual. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm not. I really feel like a lesbian, and I don't think I ever want to be with a man again.
Mhm.
And so I'm a lesbian, and but I hear people kind of that shifts and changes through time, and it can, and that's okay, and it doesn't have to
Mhm.
stay fixed.
Right. And it is fluid in the sense for some people. I had another woman who was, it was funny. She was, and I think my practice has matured too, is like I have been out longer. And so I'm much more very accepting of whatever people say they are, because that's their job to say and not mine. And she was funny. She said to me, she goes, yeah, as a lesbian. And she goes, maybe I'm bisexual. And I said, well, how about not straight? And she goes, okay, I can do that. And I'm like, okay, that works for us all.
Right, right.
So a lot of times with my clients that are questioning,
Mhm.
we use not straight.
Right.
And that's comfortable. And that's a whole discussion about labels around that one. So
Yeah, yeah.
So, Samantha, I want to thank you for being on. I really appreciated this conversation. I'm glad to know that there's other people out there that are doing this work because it's super important work. So, I'm going to put you in my Rolodex.
Great,
And
great.
let people know, or if they're looking for something in particular, I will definitely contact you and let other people know you're available. But I have 3 questions before we end today. So, do you have a book or a movie that really, you know, changed your life or changed your viewpoint about something? It doesn't have to be about your sexuality. Just curious.
I mean, I thought about this question and I don't really have one that did that for me. I feel like it was, like I said, it was really like the event of September 11th that
Mhm.
changed my perspective in a way about
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
Um,
And that
so
was your, like, we talk about in our later in life community about a catalyst, and a
yes,
catalyst can be a human being, but
yes,
it sounds like September 11th was your catalyst.
yes,
Yeah. And
yeah,
often catalytic events can be something that make people start to question things. And a lot of times it's illness, divorce, death, and
yes,
major, world traumas that can make people think. COVID for me and my client, I've just gotten a lot more people during
yeah,
COVID because all of
yeah.
a sudden people are like, I'm not straight. And that's, I think COVID has been big for a lot of people
I agree.
in reframing their lives.
Yeah.
Do you have a coming out song?
Um, I mean, there were so many, right? Like every Sarah McLachlan song, and but there's a song that I love particularly by Jill Scott, which is called Golden,
Mhm.
which just has the feeling of what it feels like to be out. So
Okay, I've gotta
yeah,
listen to that one.
yeah,
There's
it's a
a
good one.
handful of songs. All right, so if you could, what was the best thing about your life now? What is the best thing about your life now?
I think just being able to be so authentic, so in my skin, so who I am, and um, you know, I really don't I don't really give much mind to what other people think in any way about anything. I just am me, and being able to be fully myself and fully in my skin, fully in my identity, that to me is really the best thing about my life.
It's priceless, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Samantha. It was wonderful chatting with you today and getting to know you a little bit. So I really appreciate your time and thanks for being on my show.
Thanks so much, Emery. I appreciate
All
it.
right.